Mr. Cochrane, Adam Cochrane, thank you very much for being here with us this morning. And I think that your viewpoint will be very interesting for understanding what's happening in the luxury and equity and the fashion market. You are an expert of the general retail for Deutsche Bank and the luxury equity. You research very much about that. I would start with the question about inflation. What is the impact of inflation on the luxury and the fashion industry until now and in the short future?
Well, thank you for the introduction and participation in the event. I think inflation is going to have two significant impacts on both the luxury and the fashion sector. I think the first impact of inflation comes through for the consumer, so their own cost of living going up and how much money they have left to spend on discretionary items after that. And then secondly, the impact of inflation on cost of goods sold and the operating costs of the brands. In terms of the consumer side, which is arguably the area that gets the most attention, I think luxury is at less risk of inflation than the general retail sector, because the consumers generally are at the higher income demographic. So the impact of inflation of utilities, energy, gas, etc., on their finances is less impactful. So they continue to spend on luxury to a much greater degree than maybe the more mass market impact that we're going to see within retail. In terms of thinking about the cost of goods sold, so input costs and freight, again, much more of an impact on clothing than it will be on luxury goods. And the pricing power of luxury goods companies means that they're able to pass through these inflationary pressures to the consumer to a much greater degree than we're seeing across the general fashion market.
Okay, I understand that the luxury segment is much more resilient than the general fashion industry, confronting with inflation. But do you expect sort of some company crisis for the companies that are entry level, that have entry level price products? Do you think that this situation could be risky for some of them?
So I think if we're talking entry level price for the fashion industry, I think there is you've got companies which operate from lower margins in the starting place. So you're effectively have less room to play, and I think that they are going to suffer from a sales environment where you've probably got less a decline in sales at the same time as your operating costs for running your shops are going to go up. So I think at the entry level there might be some benefit from trading down as sort of shoppers go from premium brands to entry level brands. But I think at the lower end of the market, in clothing in general, we're going to see a tough time for companies in the next sort of 6 to 12 months, as they're unable to sort of recoup all of these costs from the consumers, given the lower sales environment.
Right. Going back to the luxury market, do you see the room for further price increases in the luxury market? And do you think that do you forecast good profits for this company? Because I understand that in the last few months they have had very good profits.
I think if you'd sort of take a look back pre-COVID, you probably saw price increases in the region of 3 to 5% a year for the luxury goods companies. During the COVID period, so 2020 to 2022, we've probably seen price increases in the region of 5 to 10%. So you have seen a significant acceleration in price increases. Is there more to come? Well, there appears to have been very limited impact on demand from the price increases we've seen so far, which indicates to me that we're going to see further price increases. In terms of the profitability, you've seen a significant improvement in both sales and profit margins over the last couple of years, and I think generally this will be expected to continue for the foreseeable future.
Okay, we are in a geopolitical world right now, so geopolitics is is quite important, I think, also for the luxury and fashion industries. Can you summarize what is the impact of the war on the Russian market, both on the Russian market itself and both on the Russian buyers abroad?
Yeah, so if we sort of focus on the luxury sort of market itself, if you assume that sales in Russia may be accounted for something like 3 to 5% of the global luxury market was made in Russia, and the market is growing somewhere between sort of 6 and 8% a year globally, it's not a significant impact on the overall industry. In terms of the Russian consumers, they will be a slightly higher proportion, given that some of the higher end Russian consumers are clearly purchasing in countries other than Russia, so whether it's the Middle East or Europe or the US. Now, I think the companies have taken a choice to temporarily stop trading in Russia. Let's see how that evolves over time. But if we take the view that right now that they're not trading in Russia, how much of that Russian consumer is going to be transported abroad? And I think certainly we're seeing the Middle East as being the prime destination for Russian consumers who are able to travel. They can still freely travel to the Middle East to largely recoup most of those purchases. So I think it's an important market, and they have probably managed to recover some of those sales in the Middle East.
So probably Dubai and Abu Dhabi will be the new Moscow in some way for the luxury market.
I think if you
Okay.
were to take a trip to Dubai today, I think you'd probably see that.
Right. What about China? Because these restrictions, COVID restrictions in China, are slowing down the markets and sales as well. What can we expect from China?
I think China has, if you look at the performance of luxury in China over the last couple of years, if we had this discussion straight, early 2020, I don't think we would have probably predicted how strong it had been over the following 2 years. So I think after an initial period of severe lockdowns, the Chinese market has been super strong for most of the luxury companies up until maybe the recent lockdowns that we saw in Shanghai. One of the reasons for that is the amount of Chinese tourist spend that was, instead of being made in Europe, was being spent in China. So that's probably been one of the big boosts. Secondly, there's also a bit of revenge spending in terms of people spent a bit less during the lockdown period, and then decided to spend afterwards. That they made maybe a slight change in mindset for the consumers. But overall, there's been, despite even in China, the Common Prosperity Plan, which people feared would be the Chinese government trying to limit some sales of luxury products. In reality, it hasn't had a real impact at all on the luxury sector, and it's gone from strength to strength in China.
Great. I like this revenge spending. It's a beautiful definition, I think. Yeah. Listen, a lot of conversation right now is about the disruption in the global value chains in general. I mean, is it important also for the fashion and luxury market, or do you think that for the companies in these industries, the situation is different? The supply side is important, I suppose, but probably less than others.
Yep, I think that's fair. I think if you were to take the view of any global supply chain as we went into the first COVID period, you have seen significant disruptions, particularly in fashion, in sporting goods, from lockdowns and freight issues across China, across the US, across Europe, but particularly the lockdowns in China and Vietnam impacting the fashion industry. In terms of luxury, the vast majority of production is sitting in Italy, France, Switzerland, and so much less of an impact coming from these disruptions in China. However, what you probably have seen is that across the piece, brands have taken this as an opportunity to reevaluate supply chains. And within that, if you imagine that you've decided to increase your inventory of raw materials to make your products, and also increase your inventories of finished products to make sure that if there is any disruption in terms of freight, etc., getting it to the consumers, that you can minimize that as best you can. In fashion, because luxury's already got a high proportion of products made in Europe, I think for fashion, where you've generally got maybe up to 80% made in Asia, they are reassessing some of their supply chains, making sure that you're manufacturing in more than one location, making sure that you are looking at maybe nearshoring, so more production nearer to the end market to make sure that you can get the products to the consumer. So overall, the COVID period has made companies reevaluate their supply chains, but there's much more evidence in apparel and fashion than it is in luxury goods.
Okay, thank you. During the pandemic, particularly, the online sales have grown quite substantially. Do you think that in the end, the beautiful high street shops in the European cities are going to disappear? What is the trend, in your opinion, in the online market for fashion and luxury?
Yeah, so online is growing. I think without a doubt, during the COVID period, you saw a significant step up in online penetration as consumers weren't able to visit shops. It remains much lower in luxury than it does in overall fashion, and certain markets, say China as an example, and maybe the US, have seen a higher penetration than you get in Europe within luxury. Now, I think that as shops have reopened, consumers are going back to shops across the board, whether that's in fashion or in luxury. I think it's very hard. Online should be viewed as another channel to engage with consumers. You can show them products, you can highlight images, you can maybe live stream fashion events and things, but I don't think it's ever going to be a replacement for the experience, the customer loyalty, the brand engagement that you can get from customers coming into stores. What it has meant is that retailers have had to increase the investment made in stores, so that the stores are becoming increasingly nice places, differentiated places, whether that's sort of cafes, meeting rooms, and larger, bigger stores, to make sure that customers have got a reason to come back into the store. And I think I don't think there's any time soon that you're going to see the disappearance of luxury stores. If anything, I think in some markets they're increasing the number of stores they put down.
Oh, that's great news. So we are not going to lose Via Monte Napoleone. Maybe a little bit of renovation, but not losing it.
I think that's fair. I think you'd sit there, and if you look at some of the LVMH investing in its Dior flagship, maybe its Louis Vuitton flagship in Paris, I'm sure the same thing will be happening across all brands as they come out of this and decide to invest more into those flagship stores.
I have the last question. Do you see different patterns of consumers of consuming in after the pandemic? I mean, probably there is something more is more important, the experience, the service, than the real thing. Do you see this trend?
So I think there's some slight changes that you've seen in fashion habits. So the trend to casualization that we've seen for the last decade really accelerated during the lockdown period. Obviously, with less events to go to, less reasons to buy formal clothing, you saw a significant decline. In the period post-lockdown, you've seen formal wear start to make a significant recovery, and some of the real luxury Italian brands are starting to see some of their formal wear products start to recover strongly. I don't think going forwards we're going to go back to the days of as many suits and ties as there was in the past, but I think the balance will be better going forwards. In terms of the in-store service, I think, as we highlighted a second ago, that the stores are being invested in, they are improving, and they may even have a combination of digital channels. So you come into the store, you get the service, you see the products, you have your glass of champagne, and it may be that you want the order to be made online or delivered to your house rather than carry it home. So I think the omni-channel approach will be increasingly evident over the next few years.
Mr. Cochrane, you've been very kind. The discussion has been very, very interesting, and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
It's been
time.
great.